Really appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for asking. I'm happy to do it.
Absolutely. It's really cool to get to talk to you. It's just been really kind of crazy how welcoming and open the whole sport has been.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I think too, it's the athletes enjoy getting to kind of tell a little bit about themselves and really try to continue to grow the sport. Um, from my experiences. So I've watched a few of the episodes. It's been cool to just kind of scan through and like see people's names that I know and like get to like hear a little bit about them, even though I already know them. That's neat.
Yeah, that's my goal, is really to learn myself, but also to hopefully introduce these people from a more like personal level. Maybe stuff they won't necessarily talk about on their social media just because it maybe doesn't pertain to like their fitness brand or whatever. So hopefully that's something that I am doing, is kind of opening the eyes and just like making it more of, because I feel like bodybuilding does a good job of that already, but making it more of like a personalized experience. When you're following these people, you really can know something more deeply about that person.
Yeah. And I think too, if for other competitors, it makes it relatable because most people aren't doing this full time. They're doing, something else. So for me, when I'm like looking through YouTube and I'm looking for videos to watch, it's much more relatable to me to find someone else that's like maybe in a similar position with whether it's, home life, work life, gym life, everything they're trying to balance. It makes me that confirmation of like, I'm not crazy. I'm not the only one doing this.
Yeah, for sure. I
Yeah.
think with what I've been experiencing, it seems like bodybuilding it really is like such a strong community, but then also you have to realize too that it's, you're your own athlete, you're your own coach, you're a lot of times your own team. So it's like it's such a lonely sport, even though it is a great community. And like you said, if you have somebody out there that you can kind of relate to, that you can pull something from, I think that definitely helps along those tough times.
Yeah, I mean, when you get into the thick of prep, it's nice to be able to lean on like other competitors who you can text and kind of like help you clear your mind because your mind is not always going to be a crystal clear picture when you're in the thick of it. I feel very, very blessed in the sense that my husband also competes. He did it long before I ever got into it. He does NPC, but he understands like the level of the commitment and the diet and how hard it gets. So when I get a little cranky, he has a lot more grace for me than I would probably have for myself. So in that sense, it's nice to know that like when I feel alone, like I know I'm not.
It's interesting to hear the people who have like significant others who both do and do not do bodybuilding. And to me, it's almost amazing, like in both scenarios. Like with the people who both do it, you understand like what that person's going through and things like that, but you also maybe are both going through those similar things at the same time. So I could see where that would make it also challenging. But then if the other person doesn't do it, it's like they might not even, as much as they can be supportive, they can't really understand what you're going through. They don't necessarily know exactly how to help you in a certain situation or what the right things to say are based on experience.
Yeah, and we've learned the hard way. One time, we will not do a show within usually like a 6 week period of each other. That's usually the sweet spot. Like we can both be dieting, but not necessarily be like suffering in the thick of those last few weeks. Um, so I think the only time that happened was 2019, and we haven't done it since. He's taken some time off, COVID, obviously last year, this year he did a show at the beginning of November. So it was, I believe, 6 weeks or 7 weeks before Olympia. And that was honestly, it lined up perfectly just because we were both in such a routine and a groove. Like there was no junk food in the house and we were on a similar schedule and all of those things had a compound effect for me to like go into the Olympia feeling pretty good. But I also lean on him a lot my last 4 weeks of prep. I don't want to go to the grocery store. I'm a little bit lazy around the house. So he typically tends to pick up the slack and vice versa. So we've kind of found that to be our little sweet spot.
Yeah, I was actually I was actually going to ask about that when you brought that up, about not just the competing side and like the all the stuff that you would necessarily be going through and the added things, but also like around the house stuff or different errands that other person might have to pick up more of, or if kids are involved, or if whatever it is, like it really does like add that extra layer that that person is almost like taking on part of the other person's role for a little bit.
Yeah. And we don't have any kids yet, but we have two dogs and a cat. So we have a little bit of, they need maintenance obviously throughout the day. Um, he does a great job about picking up, I will do some household chores here and there, but like I don't have the energy to like stop and clean the house for an hour, or um I my biggest chore that I hate is like putting away the laundry. So I'm like, I'll do the laundry if you want to put it away. It's finding that middle ground of like making sure I'm doing enough to where I'm not overwhelming him, but also not overwhelming myself or causing myself additional stress that it's self-induced. Does your house really need to be clean? No, but do you want it clean? Yes. They're really finding that fine line, and thankfully he does it and does it with a smile.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So how did you actually initially get into the sport of bodybuilding?
So I did my first show in summer of 2016. I cheered at a small D1 school in North Carolina in college. I had done gymnastics a little bit earlier than that, but college was kind of coming to an end. We never competed. We just did basketball games and like special appearances. That was coming to an end, and I knew I had gotten into the gym probably a year prior, but with that chapter of my life coming to an end, I realized I needed another outlet. I needed something that I could focus on, a project, something that would bring me some self-fulfillment. So my husband, he did my diet at the time. We started dieting down, and I was going to do a bikini show. So we're probably maybe 4 weeks out, and I've been dieting for a while, shape's taking place, and we realized like I'm not meant to do bikini. Like I did not have that shape, I did not have that structure, and that most likely a better avenue for me would be to do a figure show. At that time, I was just about to move to Texas, so we decided to just kind of forego it for the year, and that we would, we were moving from North Carolina to Texas. And I was like, okay, 2016, I'll do a figure show. It'll give me a little bit more time to like fill out my upper half. And then that was kind of the game plan. And then we were living in DFW, Dallas Fort Worth at the time. And my husband, it was actually our 1 year anniversary of when we were just dating. He had reached out to Trish Warren, who's local to the area. And he asked her, like, would she work with me? So that was like his present to me. He really encouraged me to do fitness based on my background, and kind of giving me that project, that performance aspect to have in my life still. So I met with her. We went over some fitness skills and stuff like that. And I remember like I was doing like this move, like just a straddle pull through to planche. And most people have no idea what that means except for other fitness competitors. But the very first time I met with her, she like looked it over at Ken and she was like, she's going to go pro. And so that year I got to work with her, which was a really great experience. She didn't compete in fitness anymore, but she was still one of the very first people when I got into fitness. I was like, Tangi and Bethany and Trish, like those were the girls that I was watching like the videos of, because the style was similar, high energy, some tumbling, a little bit of everything. So I did my first show that year. It was the Dallas Europa. So it was a pro-am show. And I was the only fitness competitor. So of course I got first. So kind of after that, I decided, okay, well, am I good at this? Or was it just because I was the only girl? So I went to North Americans that year, which was 10 weeks later. And I got second at my first national show. And I think that's when I was like, oh, like I barely missed it. And that's kind of when my goal to turn pro like came to fruition. It wasn't even until like after that second show when I did so well that I was like, okay, this is my next goal. Like I want to turn pro.
When you have like a show where you're the only competitor like that, and especially being your first one, you don't really know too much about like what necessarily being good is, not being very good is. How much does judge feedback help you, or how much did it help you in that situation?
So in that situation, like I was so new that I didn't even know that you could reach out for feedback. So I just kind of continued on. I think feedback most of the head judges are going to give you good feedback either way. I think after that, a lot of it's like a comparison game. Like, if you improve this, you're going to be closer to this, because all they can do is judge what shows up that day. You know, if 3 girls show up and 1 girl wins, that doesn't necessarily mean that she would go win another show. But your feedback is almost a little comparative to who else is there. Besides the fact of like more conditioned, grow, and fitness has so many different elements that I don't know how much of a difference it would have made back then. But knowing what I know now, once I got to that national level, I would have been reaching out if I knew that was a thing.
And then coming from cheerleading, that is like you're based on, it's like a team basis, right? How did the performance aspect go for you? Was it, I mean, I guess having a little gymnastics background, it maybe helped out, but was it weird when you first got up there and it's like, oh, I'm the only one here?
So my foundation was gymnastics. I started like 4th grade to like middle school. So I was used to that, singular type of performance. But in gymnastics, like, it's a very serious thing. Like, you don't have to worry about like what your face is looking like. You're just there to execute, the skills. No flair, really. And then going into cheer, it was kind of like have fun. There's like really, it's tight movements, you don't want to go with the flow. It's a group of people, but then your face matters a lot. So then transitioning into fitness, it's been trying to almost break some of the habits that were ingrained in me, but then keeping, some of the other aspects, like with cheer, like having your face, ready for a performance, not looking tired, enjoying yourself. But then on the opposite hand, I have a hard time being not as stiff because it's something that I did for so long. So it was, I will not lie, like to this day, like I still get like my heart is like pounding out of my chest, like nerves. And it's like a nervous, excited type of thing. So I don't know if that will ever go away because it's like so much adrenaline. But I would say, honestly, the first probably 2 shows, I didn't even notice like a difference. Like, I just didn't skip a beat until I started to like have a specific goal, like for an outcome. Then I think I placed a little bit more pressure on myself. And I was just like, your performance matters so much. If you want to do this, you have to do this. And that's when I think the anxiousness started to set in a little more.
And during your training, how did that affect, because you're putting this pressure on yourself, how did that affect your training as well? Like, was there more, kind of like frustration when things went wrong? Was there more of that just based on, I got to get this right. I got to get this right.
So with my routine, I learn new skills here and there, but I'm not typically doing something that I haven't been able to do for several years before I'm executing it. I think my frustration sets in with myself when it comes to like endurance, because any skill in my routine, if we're choreographing the routine, I have the skill solid. I'm not going to usually put in a skill that I don't already have solid by the time I do my choreography. But when you diet for a long period, your endurance, in the beginning, maybe you're gaining endurance, but then sometimes you hit this like plateau of like, my calories are low and my endurance is actually decreasing, even though I'm practicing more. So I find more frustration with myself when I'm doing a routine and I feel like I'm like gasping for air, or maybe last week I practiced it in halves. And then this week I'm having a hard time getting through that half. I notice more frustration with myself in those type of instances, more so than like a skill not going right.
Because of that increased importance on like your athleticism, your, cardiovascular endurance, things like that, what about the recovery side? Do you do anything? Have you tried anything to help maybe with that cardiovascular endurance from a recovery aspect?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the number one thing is like sleep. Like, a lot of people overlook their sleep. They're the type of people that are like, 5, 6 hours is all I need. And I'm like, I need a minimum of like 8 hours of sleep. And, you look at some of like the top athletes in the world, and they sleep because that's when you recover. And I remember, I think it was like a Joe Rogan podcast or something, and I was listening to it, And they did the statistics on like the number of people who can actually function on like 5 to 6 hours of sleep. And it's like less than like 1%. So I know how important sleep is, how much it makes a difference in your physique, your stress levels, your body is getting rid of the water, and it's eating in your recovery. Next for me, I typically do at least a monthly massage, just trying to help with some of that tightness. I tend to carry a lot of tension in my traps. And you want to just stay on top of those things to where it's not preventing you from training. This year I started, before the Olympia, I started doing the cryotherapy, which I found to help a lot. It's 3 minutes, I believe, 2 to 3 minutes. And you're in that chamber, and it's essentially the same as doing like an ice bath for 10, 12 minutes, something like that. But really what it's doing is like driving the inflammation out of your body, which is why we have aches and pains and things like that. And with fitness, we're doing, we're not just doing the training, but the routine and keeping up with those things. And then I go see a chiropractor usually every 2 to 3 weeks. So there's a lot of different elements for me to make sure that I'm staying on top of it. And that's even just like when I'm in prep, that's keeping me like baseline healthy, preventing injuries. But then when I'm off season, the focus becomes, okay, even more so that you can improve and not feel this pain next time you're in prep.
Right. Yeah. So from the mental aspect of like learning a new routine, how much how challenging is that? How much time does it gets taken up by actually learning the new routine, and how like do you go about learning it besides just doing it?
Yeah, so I work with Pro Physiques. They're based out of Arizona. So typically once a year I fly out to do choreography with Whitney, who's one of my coaches. It's typically a 2-day process. I think this last year when I went, we did it all in one day. So it was like 8 hours all day long. I usually come with like my music, the combination ideas, and anything else that I have is kind of like my vision of what I want to put on stage. So while we're doing this, we're doing the choreography, we're recording everything in segments so that I can go back and clip them all together and then have something to reference. So once I do that, I usually once I leave, or even while I'm still there, I start just watching the video all the time. Like when I'm doing cardio, I'll be like, you need to watch this 10 times if I'm, things like that, because it is just knowing it. And obviously once you're executing it, it's a little bit different because you really have to focus on your timing. But I start watching the video a lot. And then when I get home and I'm about to start practicing, I usually take a look at how many music sections I have. I tend to have at least 4 sections of like different cuts of music. It could be more, it could be less. But I will take a look at usually 30-second sections at a time. And I will watch the video for the 30-second section. I will walk through it without music, and then I try it with music. And I do that with each little section until, 1, I know the choreography. And then 2, at that point, they become the building blocks for my endurance. So if I'm doing 4 30-second sections, then next time I come in, I want to do 3 45-second sections, 2 1-minute sections. And it takes time to build that. But that's how I do my endurance training when I'm doing my routine, to a point where I get to a routine and I'm running the first minute and 40 seconds. And maybe that's all I'm running consistently, like before the day of the show.
Gotcha. And do you always run like the first portion first? Like if you're doing 4 30-seconds, do you always do it in order, or do you sometimes break it up?
Great question. I tend to, in the beginning, I'm running it from the easiest section to the most difficult section. Because if I can go in and walk through my first 30 seconds, or say it's the second 30 seconds, I know the choreography and it goes good to the music, I do it perfect the first time, I move on. If I need to repeat a section, I repeat it until I feel like I got it right, because 30-second sections are much easier than running a full routine. It's still going to be taxing, but I will basically run that section till I get it right. And usually if I have, 4 chunks of a routine, usually 2 of them for me, I'm not going to say are easy, but I can typically execute them pretty quickly. to where I'm spending majority of my practice on the sections that are giving me a harder time, because that's where I need to improve. That's been my method. And then I do get to a point where once I'm running it like in halves, I'm like, okay, well, it's the first half and the second half. You don't have a lot of options. But same kind of thing. Like I go in, I warm up, I run the first half, take a break. I warm up the second half, I run it, I take a break. And based on how I feel, that's where I'm going to spend the rest of my practice focusing on that routine.
Gotcha. This episode is brought to you by Move Your Body Apparel, a Lexington-based, community-ran premium activewear brand that promotes the importance of daily movement. Save 20% off your first order with the link below or use code TWR20 online at mybapparel.com.
If you're tired of searching for a coach or trainer, somebody who knows what they're talking about and has experience, make sure you go check out the new Coach's Corner on weightroompodcast.com. You can find quality, qualified coaches to help you achieve your goals, whether that's in bodybuilding or just general fitness. Stop wasting time and start achieving your goals today. The link to the Coach's Corner is down in the description below.
From the choreography aspect, how much, if any, psychology goes into like choreographing something to make it like pleasing to the human mind, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so that's why I work with Whitney and she does my choreography, because I'm not like a left brain creative type of person. I think I can watch routines and I can be like, well, maybe I should try this, or maybe I should change it to this, or I should turn right instead of left, and it's going to look more natural. But I cannot imagine just starting a routine from scratch with no help. I'm very, very like type A in the sense of like everything has to logically make sense to me. And this is a creative process. It's not going to make sense. And that's why I just rely on the expertise of others to get me to where I need to be. I think I've come leaps and bounds from where I started, where I'm like, I have no idea how to do this. And now I get a little bit more of a vision. Like after a show's over, when I'm done with a routine, I'm like, maybe I had favorited some songs that I really wanted to use. And I start thinking like, oh, like, let me look on YouTube and see if I can find like a mix of this. And I start to get more of a vision for my music. And then once I have that track, I've been able to like at least be like, this is how I want to open, this is how I want to end. And I'm able to do some basics, which I think helps her in her job. Be like, well, she knows she wants to do this here, and this skill needs to be in the first half because otherwise she won't do it in this half. A lot of that has become much more clear to me over the years. But I'm still not at the point where I feel like I could just sit down and knock out my own routine. That's where I've gotten better over the years, is like the brainstorming piece, like going to her with like, these are all my ideas that I want to implement. Can you make sense of them? Versus I have nothing, I'm just going to do whatever you tell me. I think that it becomes a little bit more my own, and it's helpful from her from a creative process to not be starting from zero.
So how do you mentally balance like the physique side with the performance side? Does one ever start to like almost annoy you, if that makes sense? Like where it's like, I wish I didn't have to deal with this other thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. Routine is 2/3, so it's worth more. Physique is only 1/3, but your physique also is kind of going to play a part in your routine, because if you're lean, like if you're not lean enough, it's not going to be as appealing to watch your routine. I am very, very, I don't want to say lucky, because I did have to build my frame, but my structure itself, I have a natural V taper, round muscle bellies, small joints. So in regards to the physique round, I think sometimes I get frustrated because I want to be further along in my conditioning. But when I'm realistic with myself, like I've really only been into competing for about 6 years. So my muscle maturity is not going to be as much as someone who's been doing this for 10 years. I'm 29. I'm a little bit younger in regards to the fitness division. I see a lot of girls in the fitness division kind of hitting their strides mid-30s with muscle maturity. And then when it comes to routine, I think it's that balancing act. Like I love practicing and getting together a routine, but that part becomes much more difficult when you're in a calorie deficit. So more so than how my body feels, trying to go and practice low carb, low fat, you're going to lose energy very quickly because you're expediting so much, and then you're not going to be able to do the same things at the same intensity as you were in your off season. So it really is a balancing act. Like one makes the other more difficult and vice versa, because if I wasn't doing that routine, we could push my diet even further, and then if I wasn't doing physique, I could be replenished for my routine. So it really is a hard balancing act. So I think one, it's just making sure like you give yourself enough time to prepare. It's going to take longer. I mean, unless you're one of the top athletes, it's going to take you longer than 8 to 12 weeks to get to where you want to be if you want to be one of the best or win the show that you're doing. It's most likely going to take you 16, 20 weeks. And even then, you can run the risk of injury from over practicing or, over dieting. There's a lot of components that go into that.
Yeah. And also, do you ever feel like, because like mentally you can learn something and you can maybe with a routine you can get it down pretty quick, that like the physique side, it does take, so like you mentioned there, it does take so much longer for the physique side, even if you're just throwing out the fact that you also have to do this other thing with it that hinders it. Just in general, your body takes longer to make changes. Do you ever think about that? Like, man, I can do all these things with this, with the performance side. I can choreograph a new thing and learn it within X amount of time. But with my body, it takes years to kind of feel like I'm making that in some way, same progress.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think I feel that a lot because I haven't been doing this as long. I know that genetically I have a lot of potential to get my physique where I want it to be, but while balancing this routine aspect, I'm not going to be able to work my full-time job on a low carb, low fat diet, minimal calories, do my cardio, do my training, and then additionally practice that routine. So for me, I think it is just, you have to be consistent, and you're going to have bad days. You're going to have probably bad weeks. And that's okay. I'm more so going into my season of life of, I need to have better off seasons to have a better in season. And I think every year I've gotten better at my off season, and it makes it a little bit easier. But this past year, after the Arnold, I had a carpal tunnel surgery and a meniscus resection. And so I probably, coming into the Olympia, like I had so far to go ahead of me because I finished the Arnold. It was a week later, I had my surgery. So my cardio went from, I think it was at like 45 minutes, 6 times a week, or 60 minutes, 6 times a week, to basically after a week of that, like just down to 0. And there was no taper, we were reverse dieting, but when you're that active and then that sedentary, I put on more body fat than normal. So really my goal coming out of this Arnold is to do a better job, not just with my reverse, but like decreasing the cardio, increasing the calories, and putting myself in a better starting point so that next time when I have to do this again, I don't have quite as far to go.
So many people do mention like that post show, how they don't take it into consideration, and they sometimes forget, especially for the newer athletes. It's like you're so focused on this prep's going to be so hard, and then the show is going to be such this crazy cool experience, and then they almost just like completely forget that you're in a state that you can't stay in. This isn't a sustainable thing. What do we do to get back to normal, kind of?
Yeah. And I think it takes time and honestly trial and error. It's not always going to be what worked for me last time isn't going to work for me this time. Same thing with prep. And I just think mentally, it's like you need to almost have a plan before you even go to the show. I just feel like once you leave the show, if you've already let the window go too long, it's really hard to rein it back in because, food, it can be addictive. Sugar is really addictive. It's like, considered like a drug, really, for a lot of the population. And so if you don't have a plan of what you're going to do, like I'm going to do whatever I want that weekend, back on plan by Monday. I'm going to check in with my coach Wednesday. That's still a little vague, but it's enough to be like, I'm cutting the window off here and I'm going back on my diet here. Giving yourself that line in the sand as you would if you were doing a show, maybe you took that weekend off and then you have another show in 4 weeks. I need to be a little bit more specific with myself in those windows. And then my other goal is to have more specific off-season goals. I think where I've struggled with my off-season is I don't really have a specific goal. It's I don't want to gain as much body fat as last time. I don't want to get as heavy as last time. But that's still kind of vague. Like, do I have a strength goal? Do I have a measurement goal? Giving myself a few more parameters so that if I start to see myself sliding, I'm going to be like, okay, I think we need to rein it back a little bit for a couple weeks, and then we can continue to push forward. But trying to find those parameters for myself.
Something that I think about all the time too is like whenever I set a goal, it's great because it really does help keep you accountable. But at the same time, it put, the more specific that goal is, the more kind of pressure on yourself that is too.
Yeah, just 1,000%. Like it's a mental game in prep. And, I want to say it was 3 weeks ago, like I had texted my coach and I was just like, hey, like I'm really considering being done after the Arnold. Like I'm like feeling no joy in what I'm doing right now. And in the moment, that's true. But if I were to pull myself out of that and be off season or be one day post show, do I really want to be done with this? And the answer is no. It's really, really easy to get in your head. And especially the longer you diet, the more stress you have, the more responsibilities you have. It would take a very rare type of person to say that they've never had any doubts, because it's natural to doubt yourself, especially when you're someone, I can still consider myself like up and coming in the pro league. I haven't been doing this that long. And I still feel like I have a ways to go to get to where I want to be. So it's natural, I think, for me to doubt myself, but I think for a while I was like pushing that down. And then I felt like that I needed to verbalize that to them and that I was having doubts and things like that. And, if you have a good coach, they're going to do everything they can to just pull you out of that place and remind you of your potential and everything that you have going on, because you're in a weak mindset. You're not a weak person. So I think all of that formulated into like, I'm going to actually be spending my last 2 weeks of prep in Arizona. I'm going to be with them almost every day leading into the Arnold. And that was enough to get me excited again. I felt excited because I wasn't like 6 weeks out. Like I need to make it to show day. I'm like, okay, I need to make it to the day I get to Arizona. So it shortened that gap. And then I was just like, there's so many things that I'm not going to have to think about because like, it's going to be in their hands. They'll get their eyes on me more frequently. So even something as small as that just was able to pull me out of, I think I want to be done, to let's give it everything I got.
Yeah. I think it's so hard to know too, like, especially in the moment, if that's a lasting feeling, or if, like you said, it's just a momentary thing, that feeling of, is this for me? Is this worth it? Should I be doing something else? It's so tricky. Your mind really, I feel like your mind is this short-term weapon. And if you can use it right, you can like dominate the short term, which can lead to a lot of long-term success. But then it can also turn on you where it's like it wants to be happy in the short term. It wants to be fulfilled. It wants to like have that gratification in the short term a lot of times. So you almost have to like use your mind as a weapon, but also know how to not let it turn on you.
Yeah. And I mean, you said it best when you said it's like a short-term thing, because a lot of that would be me acting on emotion. My mind is telling me I have this heightened emotion. I'm low calories. I'm low energy. I don't feel good. And, that's when it's easiest to quit. No one quits their goal sitting on their couch, nice and warm and full, having a good night at home. That's not when you want to quit. You want to quit when it's hard. And that's like natural human instinct. But to not quit and to keep going, those are the moments I know, like when this is all said and done, I'm going to look back on that moment and know that I felt weak and that I did not want to say anything because I didn't want to be perceived as weak. But because I said something, I was able to get through it. I think it's unrealistic for a lot of competitors who are like, no bad days, you know, all in all the time, because that's not realistic to most people. So I'm interested to just see how I feel, post show. I don't by any means think that this is going to be my last show. But just to see how I feel post show and looking back on like the feelings I had to overcome during this prep.
Right. And then kind of going back in time a little bit to the Olympia, tell us a little bit about that, first, like just being able to say, hey, we're going. And then obviously during the prep, I can only imagine it's maybe a little bit different than, not necessarily what you're doing is different, but how you feel during it is a little bit different. And then, the experience at the show as well. Tell us a little bit about all that.
Yeah, so I actually qualified in October of 2021. So it was a little over a year. And I do remember, like, I went into my season 2021. I'd only done one pro show. I didn't do well. I took 2020 off and I was like, okay, give this season everything you got. And then if it's not what you want it to be, there's no shame in walking away. Just because at that point it is like you're working full time. Fitness is a huge time commitment outside of just the training and the cardio. And I think I had a lot of doubts if I would be able to accomplish anything in the IFBB. I just saw everyone who was ahead of me and how good they were. And I just never perceived myself as being able to obtain that type of goal. So I went in. The first show I did was Chicago. It was a little over 2 years since I had competed. I think I got 8. I think there was about 15 or 16 girls. So then after that, I was like, okay, middle of the pack. That felt pretty decent. I did Tampa. That was 2 weeks later. And I went into Tampa and I was just like, I want to get top 5. So I went into Tampa and I got 5th. So I felt great. That was my 3rd pro show, the first time I ever placed. And Olympia was still like pretty far out of my mind. So then I went to Arizona Pro that same year and I got 3rd. And that was the cutoff for the 2021 Olympia. So I already knew that I didn't have enough points. I was at the top of the points list, but I wasn't within the first 3 to make it to the 2021. So then I think it was a month later, I did Tennessee and I won and I got my 2022 qualification. Which was obviously, I was super stoked and I was super excited because that's usually the ultimate goal in our sport, is to make it to the Olympia. But I think where I was starting, I was so far away from that goal that I had to give myself smaller goals in order to accomplish it. Because if I was being too optimistic and not realistic with myself, I wasn't going to do the work that I needed to do to win. So I did that. And then they announced that the Olympia was going to be till December of next year. So I was like, oh man, that's 14 months away. That's a long time. So I applied for the Arnold last year. Silently. I didn't tell anyone but my husband because I was so sure I wasn't going to get invited again, that self-doubt. And then I got invited and we had 11 weeks to prep. But we got it done and I got 6th, which was great, top 6 at the Arnold place and get a trophy. And that was like the epitome to me of like, I can't believe this just happened. Like I'm living a dream. And then we started, I had my surgeries. I went through a lot of recovery and I started prepping for the Arizona Pro for 2022, which was 6 or 7 weeks before the Olympia. But we decided not to do that show just because the Arnold was going to be 11 weeks after the Olympia. And that's just a really long time to do a show and peak, 7 weeks later, do a show and peak, and then 11 weeks later, do a show and peak. So we just did the Olympia. I was in first call out, which was awesome to go there. I think there was 20 girls. There was 20 people that qualified. I think 20 that made it to stage. And there was 8 in the first call out. So that felt really, really good. Because I've always worried more about my physique than my routine. And then after routines, I ended up ninth overall. So going into the Olympia, I had set a more of a personal goal to like enjoy myself, because who knows if I'll get this opportunity again. I surely hope that I do, but you never get to redo it for the first time ever. You know, you'll do it again, but it won't ever be for the first time. So my personal goal was top 10 and to just enjoy myself. You know, both of those things I feel like I accomplished. I think the only thing I look back and the execution of my routine wasn't where I wanted it to be. And I still was able to finish top 10. But for me, I also take a lot of pride in doing my best. And I just didn't feel like that was my best. Because if I had gone out and knocked it out of the park and feel like I did my routine 10 out of 10 and I ended up 11th, I would still probably feel really, really proud because I knew it was my best. But I finished ninth and I knew it wasn't my best. And that's harder for me to like get over than, you know, doing my best and getting last. I had a hard time with the floor. It was really squishy. I bobbled a few times on a few different things. Just wasn't really able to prepare for like such a different flooring. But overall, we had a great, great time. The Arnold applications were due before the Olympia. So then we had to wait about 3 weeks before we found out about the Arnold.
This podcast is sponsored by Smoking Gun Coffee, a veteran-owned coffee company that strives to give back to those in need. Don't forget to use code TWR10 for a 10% discount at checkout. This episode is brought to you by Move Your Body Apparel, a Lexington-based, community-ran premium activewear brand that promotes the importance of daily movement. Save 20% off your first order with the link below or use code TWR20. Online at mybapparel.com. You've mentioned like self-doubt a few times, and you know, you didn't think maybe when you got into the pro league, you know, you weren't sure how, you know, you comparing yourself to the other athletes, am I kind of on their level yet, things like that. Do you feel like it's only self-doubt, or do you feel like you put some of that self-doubt as like these other people are doubting me too?
I think maybe in the beginning I felt like other people were doubting me. I think I'm very much so like a realist, and I think I'm a realist because I don't like to get my hopes up. And so when I used to think about competing, the ultimate goal was top 5. It wasn't even going to the Olympia because I thought that's what was in my reach. But then once I did it, I was able to like set a bigger goal. And then once I did that, I was able to set a bigger goal. So I think it's like a natural instinct for me to protect myself from failure or feeling, you know, I was really hoping to get top 3, or I was really hoping to do X, Y, and Z. It's almost like a protective measure for myself. But it also can have the adverse effect to where if you have the most potential in the world and you're setting your goal just short of like greatness, are you only ever going to accomplish just short of what you would have accomplished? And I think that's still where I am today, is like, am I setting a goal that's big enough, or am I doubting myself and limiting what I could achieve?
Yeah, it's tricky. And does it feel like because you have achieved things that you didn't necessarily see yourself achieving, that window for yourself is opening up a little bit more as time goes by?
Yeah, and I think it happens little by little. It's not like you're going to have a shift overnight. But I did feel like, you know, applying for this Arnold, I felt pretty confident that I was going to get invited. I didn't know for sure the Arnold's not like the Olympia where it's black and white. But I felt pretty good. I had gotten 6 last year. I got top 10 at the Olympia. My previous show before that was a win. So I was like showing continued improvement. So I felt like I had pretty decent odds, and then kind of getting invited, it kind of solidified that for myself. And I feel pretty good. Like where I started, I would have, you know, gone into a show and been like, I just hope I'm in the top 5. And now if I were to prepare and go into a show, I wouldn't even expect anything less unless I like really messed up, because I know how to prepare and I know what they're looking for. I know what my physique needs to look like. I have 2 coaches, you know, routine and a physique coach. And they're going to be honest with me and make sure that I'm continuing to improve. So I think in the beginning I started, like I said, I just wanted to get top 5. And now when I go into a show, I'm like, okay, like I really want to win. If I get top 5, I'm still going to be happy. I'm still going to be pleased. But if I did worse than that, I don't think that I would be that great in that situation. But I feel like I would have to really, really mess up a lot for at this point. And so now it becomes, okay, how do I win? How do I get back to the Olympia? And then once I get to the Olympia, for me, it's going to be like, okay, well, how do I improve from last year? So focusing more on that improvement piece, I think is the building blocks, and then allowing those, whispers to kind of get smaller of the doubt.
You mentioned also like feeling like you're still a newcomer in the pro league. When you look around at like the competition versus looking at yourself, does it ever feel like does it ever almost feel like you're looking at the other people and then giving yourself this status versus looking at yourself in the mirror and giving yourself another status? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think too, like part of it comes from like last year, the only shows I did was the Arnold and the Olympia. So those were both first time experiences for me. And I'm like looking around and I'm like, some of them like Missy and Oksana and Ariel, like I've followed them for so long, like watching them compete and like get to the top of the food chain. You know what I mean? So like it was almost for me like a little surreal to be like, I'm not here to watch them. I'm here to compete with them. So that was a really, really strange thing to experience because you're like a bit of a fan. I'm a fan. And so to be there and trying to focus on myself and what I need to do, but like I'm so excited just to be here. I think that I felt a bit more last year of just like a little overwhelmed by the experiences because they are such big shows. Versus when I would go to, a Tampa Pro, a Chicago Pro. Yeah, I'm still going to get nervous and I'm going to be excited, but I'm typically not looking around at like, here's, Miss Fitness International and, Miss Fitness Olympia. Like I'm typically not competing with them at those smaller shows. So I think for me, that was it. And then the other thing I need to stop doing is like, I need to get backstage and I need to just like seclude myself because I get a lot of anxiousness. And once that takes over, it's really hard to stop your body from responding to nerves. So I think that's something like I remember like looking around backstage at the Olympia and I'm like, what am I doing here? And then, not that long after that, I was standing in first call out. So it's trying my best not to be self-sabotaging.
Right. Yeah. And it's funny, getting to talk to different Olympians, hearing their kind of their take on how they feel about that experience of like standing amongst people that in reality, like your peers, but in a lot of ways that you're still their fans, or you're still, you learned a lot from that person, through videos or social media or whatever it is, like they have an influence on your career. It's really interesting how certain people react in different ways.
Yeah. And I'm hoping, this year going into the Arnold, it's going to be less because it's not the first time I'm doing it. And now I've been able to compete with these girls a few times. It's not the first time. I think it's a little bit easier to manage, but the first couple of times it's just so much excitement. You're so excited. Like you worked so long to accomplish something and then you're there and you're trying to enjoy it, but you're also still trying to compete. And then it's heightened by like, I want to watch their individual routine and I want to watch their, fitness routine, but you're like, I still need to focus on myself. It's hard, I think, especially the first time. So I'm hoping this year I'm just focus on myself. I can go back and watch anything that's happening live. Yes, it would be cool to watch it live time, but I'll just focus on myself and go back and watch those later.
Yeah. So what are the some of the differences and some of the similarities of competing at, the Olympia versus the Arnold, and not just competing, but also just the experience of, being at the event itself?
So both are pretty similar. Arnold is an invite only competition and Olympia is a qualification only. event. They're both the only two events where it's almost like white glove for the athletes. Like they pay for the athletes transportation. You get 3 nights hotel stay. So that really mitigates the cost of competing at that high level. They want the athletes to come. You get a per day diem. And those are really the main differences between competing in those and then competing in like any other show, because you're coming out of pocket for everything. It's very, very organized. I would say for me, the biggest difference between the Arnold and the Olympia this year was just the sheer size. The Arnold only had 10 athletes. It was a little more personalized versus the Olympia. I think there was 20 girls. So it was a little bit more rushed. You didn't have as much time to do your individual presentation. And it was the largest Olympia in history. But part of that came with the fact that it was a 14-month qualification period versus the normal 12. So it was huge. The other big difference between those shows is just the size of the stage. Like the Arnold and the Olympia are both big stages versus a smaller tiered show. So you have much more room to work with, but also, on the other hand of that, you have so much more ground to cover. When you're choreographing your routine, there's things you have to think about to make sure that you're covering enough of the stage. But both of those for me were great experiences just because of the fact that you work so long to get somewhere. You pour a lot of time and money into the sport, and then to reach the point where you're not spending as much money and you're not paying for your travel or your hotel, that to me kind of solidified like I had reached another level versus just being a pro.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty cool to I feel like to just be this, sounds weird, but like this normal average person in a way. Like you're not a superstar like basketball player where it's like you're going to this high school and you're really, really good, and you're going to college and you're really good, and you go to pro and you get drafted, and like that kind of experience. Like this is something where you can like choose to do it almost like at any time in your life, and you can just work really hard. Obviously it takes a good luck of genetics sometimes too to get to that level, but like you can work really hard at something and you can see those rewards. I think that's such a cool thing that bodybuilding that it allows, because it's not just like you're working hard and getting on stage and that's it. You're building these character traits, and you're like, it's all focused around like your lifestyle and how much you're willing to put in, how much you're willing to, impose discipline in your life. And I think it's such a unique experience amongst, looking at it in comparison to like other typical, like traditional sports.
Yeah, I think for me, it's taught me a lot of like mental endurance in the sense of there's no shortcut. You can't cheat the diet. You can't cheat the training, the cardio. Your look is going to reflect your work. And it's taught me that, if I reflect that a lot too in my job of like, it doesn't have to be a quick fix, like mental endurance and mental fortitude to know that you can work really, really hard for something right now. And maybe it's 12 weeks from now when you step on stage, maybe you're working towards something that's going to pay off in 2 years, but being able to remind yourself that like one of my favorite quotes out there is just like the day you plant the seed is not like, it's something about like the day you plant the seed isn't the day you reap the fruit. Like you have to put in the time and the effort and set the foundation. You have to take care of yourself. And I think that relates to so many topics in life, whether it's health and fitness or your career, school, studying, your relationships. You have to work at them without thinking that there's going to be instant gratification.
Yep. Like we were talking about before, it's kind of the natural way of our brain to go after that instant gratification. So if we can kind of defy nature in a lot of ways, we can do crazy things. We can do amazing things with our lives if we're willing to just like almost forget the easy way. If we're just willing to say, all right, like you said, this is getting up at 5 a.m. to go work out, or maybe taking your Sundays and only doing meal prep for the day. Like if you're willing to make those sacrifices, then it's going to maybe suck a little bit in the moment, but you're going to be able to do things. I'm sure, if you look back from when you first started, you probably never would have imagined like where your life would be now.
No, honestly, this kind of all started as like a bucket list thing. Like I wanted to kind of have a hobby. I never imagined taking it this long, this far. And you know, when I think about it, I'm like, I'm 29 and I'm like realistic in the sense of like, you know, my husband and I do want to have a baby eventually, but a lot of that is now planned around this. Like we're going to plan to have a baby when I'm done with competing. Um, so 35, 36, 37, I don't know, but you know, other parts of my life are now basically dictated by how I'm doing in this sport. Um, and you know, as long as I'm still getting fulfillment from it, so it is just amazing to see, like, you know, 23-year-old me when I did my first show would have told you, you know, by 30, you're going to have a baby and you're going to do this and that and blah, blah, blah. But it has really just changed so many aspects of my life. And I think for the better. Obviously, it's not always going to feel that way in the moment, you know, if you're having a bad day, a bad week. But overall, like I see myself in a different light. I feel like my work ethic has been, you know, just like harvested. I have a lot of grit and determination, and I'm not saying I didn't have those things before, but now I know how to focus it and how to, like I said, that mental fortitude of just like the endurance of like keep going, keep going, keep going, and doing those type of things, and then just being like, well, I want to go to happy hour, so I'm going to stop today and I'll restart next week. And, or there's cupcakes in the break room and I really want that. Like, those are the short term things that make you feel good.
And I think getting into bodybuilding, not that it necessarily even has to be bodybuilding, but I think bodybuilding is a great one for all the reasons you just mentioned. But getting into something like right after college or right at that point to where you don't have that structure of like
Mhm.
other people kind of dictating a lot of what you're doing, whether with, you know, with school and things, you know, it's such a like a really good time because it puts you back into like it gives you a routine, it gives you a foundation, it gives you those I don't want to say like rules or anything, but it gives you some like some things to say, this is what I do, this is what I don't do.
Yeah, I think structure is the best word. Like, I thrive in structure. You know, tell my husband or some of my friends, like, I struggle a little bit more in my off season because of the flexibility. I don't want to say that I'm like going off the walls or anything, but when I don't have to get something done, I might procrastinate it a little bit more versus when I'm in prep, my alarm goes off. Maybe I snooze it a couple times, but like I know that I have a hard time that like I need to get up if I'm going to do my cardio, if I'm going to make it to work on time, get ready, you know, make sure that my food's ready, you know, get through the day. And if I'm not prepared for the day, I'm more likely to fall off my plan because what if I don't have enough food or, you know, X, Y, and Z, I didn't pack what I needed. So I really do thrive in the structure of prep, having a goal, you know, I need to be 100% because this is happening in 16 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever the timeline is, versus off season when it's like, well, I don't know the next time I'm going to get on stage. So maybe that cupcake in the break room won't hurt this time. And, you know, I think I used to especially when I was really getting first into competing as a pro, like I'd be like, well, I'm going to do this now because I know I can't do it then versus just taking a more moderate approach and being like, if you want to be at the top of the IFBB, if you want to be a top pro, you're not going to have balance. You're going to have times that are intense and less intense, but you're not going to really have balance compared to a normal person.
Yeah, because I think you learn to see how the one temptation or one thing that gets you a little bit further away from your goal, you can learn to see it in much like a longer vision to where starting out, you might think, oh, this is going to be bad for today. You know, this might harm me today because today I need to, you know, we're having a weigh in today, so I'm not going to eat anything bad today. And then the more you learn and the more you grow, it's like, oh, I can think how this is going to affect me in a month, and then how that's going to affect me in 6 months, and then a year, and then 2 years. So I think just the more that you're willing to like put yourself in the position to make a choice that is, you know, based around a goal.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, like it's your decision and you're in the driver's seat. So maybe those small decisions aren't gonna, it's today, I'm gonna be fine tomorrow, but it's when you make those decisions every day, they have a really big compounding effect on a long-term goal. And I think it's pretty normal these days to shoot for the short term. I want the quick fix. I want, to go get a BBL and look like X, what's popular right now versus like, I'm going to take the time, I'm going to take months, I'm going to take years and build the physique that I want while also maintaining a diet and, doing it by choice and not because someone's telling me to.
Yeah. I think it's amazing and sad a lot probably that discipline has almost become like an extreme sport, like it's so like anti what we're doing in this culture that it's become like discipline literally has become like the only place you're finding it is in like these extreme situations.
Yeah, which it does blow my mind because there's so many times where I feel like not more so now, like I feel like I've eliminated a lot of the people who are trying to give me external temptation, but explaining to people like, hey, every time you try to deter me from my goal, you're hurting me. You think you're trying to get me to have fun, but like my goal is more than that. And explaining it to them that like, when you're doing this, it's hurting me. If they're your real friends or they really care about you, they're going to be like, oh my God, like, I'm so sorry. Like, I didn't see that side of it. And if they're not, they're going to continue to try to pressure you into things versus support you in your journey. So I think in the beginning, that's hard for a lot of competitors because you're going to lose friends and you're going to lose touch with people who you realize were your Friday night, Saturday night, like out on the town type of friends versus let's get coffee, let's catch up, let's have a real conversation about something else.
Yeah, very true. I can't remember where I saw it. I think it was on somebody's social media, but it kind of in regards to the same thing of like, don't, if somebody makes you feel bad about something that you love doing, it's also good for you. They're probably not, that's probably not a relationship you should have, whether it's a relationship or a friendship or, an acquaintance, whatever. Like you got to surround yourself with people who are, only there to make sure you're doing the best for yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's been really good getting to talk to you tonight, though. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast and sharing, and I'm looking forward to, hopefully seeing you at the Arnold.
Yes, thank you so much. I really enjoyed getting to talk with you. I will be out in Ohio. I think I get in March 1st from Arizona, and I'll be there through the weekend.
If you're tired of searching for a coach or trainer, somebody who knows what they're talking about and has experience, make sure you go check out the new Coach's Corner on weightroompodcast.com. You can find quality, qualified coaches to help you achieve your goals, whether that's in bodybuilding or just general fitness. Stop wasting time and start achieving your goals today. The link to the Coach's Corner is down in the description below.